I'll check this out. So, like, let's talk about WoW. Let's talk about WoW once again because favorite game. I should ask myself why the fuck there is no 10-man rating anymore. And well, Irmarix, Irmarix,
10-man rating had its first start in Karazhan.
Mareda, Irmarix. Irmared actually answers this question, which is I'm actually fucking surprised because basically like 10-man rating is actually easier to set and to actually have like to keep like stable as a guild, you know, because like believe it or not, like believe it or not, WoW is a team game, right? Um so I'm actually surprised because 10-man raiding is actually reasonable. Finding 10 people every week to fucking raid with is actually easy. Finding 20, it is not. It is, well, it is actually not. But at the same time, mm, classic WoW vibe, you know? Vanilla WoW vibes, original WoW vibes, right? So, but yeah, I'm actually curious what killed it. What killed the 10-man rating because like I really don't understand. Like it is like more practical to do 10-man rating. It is more safe. There is like less like it's less likely to fucking like not understand what the problem is, who is the problem, and a lot of like strategies are like basically just easier like as 10-man rating. So and now 10-man rating, 20-man rating actually gives the same stuff. So I'm actually curious. Let's check it out.
Back in the Burning Crusade. It was in 10-man rating had its first start in Karazhan back in the Burning Crusade. It was incredibly popular amount of people to bring to a raid, and it made Karazhan very accessible. Later on, they went with a 25-man as a default, and then Wrath of the Lich King created 10 and 25-man versions of all raids. However, the 25-man mode was always the real version, and 10-man was just kinda playing second fiddle to the
Yes and no, because like basically like it was the case, but at the same time like a lot of people and once again people tend to forget like people are casuals like the fucking like average player got access to fucking 10-man rating and not 25-man rating because it took so much more commitment and basically you needed to do 10-man rating to get to 25-man rating, right? But also like it made it accessible and usually the casuals they will only do like 10-man rating and stick to that like just because of how much organization 25-man rating was back in the day. Now times has changed. I don't know like
actual rating. In TOC, Blizzard added
I think rating has changed as a whole. Like it became like easier, more accessible. Basically, like the heroic mode became mythic. Basically, like the normal is basically became like this casual 10-minute experience that like people used to have. That's my guess.
heroic 10-man modes, which they carried over to ICC, and they were TOC. Blizzard added heroic 10-man modes, which they carried over to ICC, and they were pretty popular. People liked the 10-man version was actually difficult rather than the easy mode. And since Blizzard was adding different difficulties of raids and Cataclysm, they tried something new. They made it so the 10-man heroic and 25-man heroic would drop equal item level gear. The 25-man mode would just drop more of it. And this essentially meant that the 10-man version was legitimate endgame content now, and you could completely ignore the 25-man mode if you wanted, because you can get just as geared as higher player count mode.
And this was better just because like like I was a guild leader and raid leader and during Cataclysm. Do you know how fucking like difficult it is to fucking like keep motivated 10 people? Just 10 people to fucking come back to the game and be there for raiding. Yeah, do that with fucking 25 people, like, and try to fucking keep a roster up. You know, like if you do not own a small corporation, or like if you're not like basically Method or Liquid, it's really hard. Like if you don't pay people to actually fucking come back. it's not hard per se. It takes a lot of commitment, and this commitment, like, I don't know if it changed, but like back in the day, it was like just like a fucking like bro, like even 10 men was like such a fucking hustle to fucking get people keep coming and for the fucking rain. But it was like on like just like these like unforgettable moments though, because like like I was there, like I was there in the fucking like Twitch chat that people do when something in awesome happens. It was kind of the same.
while also completing difficult bosses. The 25-man version was always thought of as more difficult than the 10-man version, so that's usually the version which would be counted for world first races, but they would still also report on the 10-man heroic first kills as well. At the end of Cataclysm, they added LFR, and in Mr. Pandaria, they added the Flex mode, as well as changing Heroic to Mythic and swapping the names of all the modes around. And at the very end of the expansion with the launch of Warlords of Draenor, Blizzard decided to end 10-man Heroics, now called Mythics, and instead just made the hardest difficulty be 20-man only, but the new normal and heroic modes could now field 10 to 30 players, and the boss encounters would scale based on how many players you had in your raid group. So with all of this changing around of the modes, what they essentially did was just remove 10-man mythics from the game, and then lowered 25-man mythics down to 20. And ever since then, this has kind of been the end of small raid groups being able to complete competitive content.
It is still great, like, because like you think like 25 to 20 man rating is not a big change. Well, it is. It definitely is. It is like well, basically 1/5, right, of the rate that you do not need to recruit, that you do not need to fucking like so 20 man is actually like reasonable, but it's just surprising to me because I quit playing after Cataclysm.
Now, if you want to do cutting end raids, you have no choice but to get 20 people together in order to get any kind of attempts in. You see, at the end of Mista Pandaria, people were really taking advantage of just how gimmicky you could do fights with only 10 people. The world first mythic 10-man version of Garrosh was healed by a single holy priest, and in fact a lot of fights were healed with just one healer, because they would min-max their characters in a way where they didn't really need more healers. Generally, 10-man modes were balanced around having 3
Okay, this is actually interesting because usually you will need 2 to 3, yeah.
of them, but you'd regularly go down to 2 healers on non-healing intensive fights, and healing them with 1 healer was not supposed to be possible, especially not on the end boss of the hardest raid of the current difficulty. So it was really hard for Blizzard to balance the encounters around only 10 people, because of how different so many classes are and what they can bring to a raid. And this was in Mista Pandaria when classes were the most homogenized they've ever been in the game's history. Although that probably also contributed to them being able to do stuff like only bring in 1 healer or 5 mages as all their DPS. At the BlizzCon panel for Warlords of Draenor, about 1/4 of the questions asked in their Q&As were just to revert the change of 20-man mythic so they could keep doing it with 10 people.
My question goes on to 10-man rating.
So I'm in a 10-man guild that does heroic content on 2 nights a week, and I'm in for some big changes.
Features like normal and heroic mode rating will be available across realm.
Yeah, so you do see this kid? This kid does not have the fucking time or organization to fucking like be into a fucking like a 25-man raid. Like it's just like like think like this is why I was so shocked because like basically like this is the average player. Bro, like the fucking like Twitch streamers that you fucking see, well me as well, right? It's not your average player. This is your fucking average player, dude. That like actually is the consumer, and that actually fucking like matters when it comes to the gaming experience, because veterans and like hardcore gamers like this like us, we will adapt, and but will actually like not being able to fucking like get like this beautiful experience of raiding, because fuck you need to be in a fucking 20-man guild like or 25 back then, and it's really difficult to fucking like do that while going to school, do that while fucking going to do your academics and stuff. So, but these days is actually like good enough, because like normal is actually like accessible through pickups. And through intercross, interrealm, like interfaction, fucking like inter everything that they did. It's actually like now they really fixed it, but it's just interesting. But remember that like I always say in my videos, like people fucking like trashing about WoW or like talking about like min-maxing and all this stuff. This is the average player. This is not you, not me. Like this is and the dude before. Like these are the biggest fans, and these are like the people that are like non-toxic, not toxic, and like just like awesome people all around that just wants to fucking play the game and not fucking like not want desire to fucking like make see their favorite game become like a basically a torture simulator, you know?
That being said,
Hi, I'm Palthus from Malganis. Right now, there are 7 times as many guilds that have killed Garrosh on 10-man as opposed to 25. Behind every one of those guilds is a unique culture, leadership, and style.
And this is actually like a really good and beautiful argument.
By going to a 20-man raid, you're completely changing that. And what are you gonna do to provide content for people that want to raid hardcore as a 10-man, as a small group?
And do you know what's missing as a 10-man? Like, because they took away 10-man rating, the coziness of fucking like 10-man rating. You just know everyone by name. You just, as a guild leader, this is like, these are like the fucking like delicacies of a guild leader and a raid leader. You just know everyone. You know their quirks. You know what they're all about. Or what's their day, and you have like this kind of like closeted experience, like just like bubbled experience with like a small amount of players, and you get to do like progress, and it's really different compared to 20 man, because like 10 compare it to a concert, right? Like a concert where like only 10 men, like there's like only like one artist and like nine fucking people, right? It's a small concert, cozy, like chill, you know. You make it like one artist and like let's say 5 artists and 3 artists and 17 men 17 people, right? Completely changes the fucking like ambience and just like the way people interact with each other, you know? Like you don't get to make as many friends, and like it just takes away the coziness of like the 10-man rating, which is a shame. This should allow like for, or at least like make it like 12 or 13 for a 13 main rating, you know?
I mean, this is something that we've addressed. The reality is that moving forward, we have to make the decision. Do we want to support multiple different difficulties separately, only at this highest level, or do we want to streamline the system going forward? And our answer is that we have settled on 20-player content. And I completely understand that it is a difficult challenge and it's going to be a difficult adjustment to make, and that many people may be unable to make that adjustment. And that is unfortunate. But there is awesome content waiting for you at the end of the tunnel. And we ask that you bear with us and come with us on that trip, because we think it's going to be awesome when we get there.
Yeah, so this is interesting because like the problem for them is actually the streamlining. So basically making like the game making the game stable when it comes to like updates and pushing for new content and actually releasing new content. So I actually understand this argument absolutely, where it's like you cannot like take away the 25 man because this is a cool like a game design choice, but at the same time like the problem is that like you cannot fucking have 15 teams of game designers that fucking like allow for a double system. So I'd rather like have a less good experience or like a different experience rather than have no experience at all. Like it's better to have like a worse game than have no game at all. And streamlining is really important to basically game developers this big. So I say understand this argument. Makes sense. Makes a lot of sense to me.
But I do apologize.
You could also get really slow computers and just play heroic.
But Blizzard just brushed off all their concerns and just told them, it's easier for them to balance it around 20 people, so they're just gonna go with this, and it will be better for the long-term health of the game. Here's the thing though, 10-man mythic raiding was infinitely more popular than 25-man. The participation rate in 10-man was so high that it was incredibly common for many servers to not have a single 25-man mythic raid team that would clear the current content before the next patch came out, as even the most dead servers could field a 10-man mythic raid team. And there was lots of competition at that more casual level, where
But back then there was interfaction gaming did not exist, and inter-server gaming did not exist as well. So now that it exists, actually it makes sense and it's possible, because like bro, like back then, remember WoW living like actually like choosing like a dead server and being in a dead server. Yeah, exactly. This doesn't fucking like it's not a problem anymore. So actually like new solutions has been found. Like I really like the way like actually like Blizzard took mastered their artistry when it comes to like game design, when it comes to World of Warcraft. There's a lot of problems. Yeah, but they found a lot of solutions, you know.
the vast majority of WoW players occupy. So if 10-man raiding was so much more popular than 25-man, why did they decide to go 20-man as a default? Well, it's a combination of balance and encounter design. The 10-man mythic modes were just straight up easier than 25-mans. No one at the top level who competed for world first races took the 10-man race seriously, even if they were reported on rather seriously at the time. Everyone knew that the real race was in the 25-man modes, and that's where they would dedicate most of their time and effort. Although some of the top guilds...
Yeah, but like the races, fucking red races, no one fucking cares. It concerns like fucking like 5 people, and so this is like basically not arguments, and like I understand this, but I understand why he talks about it. It's actually like it's important to talk about it, but it's also important to remember that like world first races concern 5 people in the world. Okay, like basically like a couple guilds. That's it.
Did take 10-man seriously to an extent, and would do them almost exclusively, with Paragon being one of the most notable, as their guild got a ton of world first kills under their belt, and converted completely to 10-mans in Mista Pandaria. Although even they admitted that they would rather do 25-man, but they didn't have a roster in order to support that. So they were kind of forced into doing 10-man onlys, and they kind of disbanded once they could no longer do that. Because part of the popularity of the 10-man mode was that it was way easier to get a roster of 10 good people and keep them together than it was to keep a roster of 25. Jeff Bezos is said to have a philosophy where work teams should not be bigger than what could be supported with 2 boxes of pizza at a party. And the average pizza has about 8 slices, which means less than 16 people. He says small groups just work together much better, and it's harder to manage bigger ones.
This is actually like a good argument and a good quote. Yeah, and like he doesn't mention it, but like the coziness, just like oh comfortable it was to fucking raid as a 10-man guild, a 10 people guild, 10 people raid, 10-man raid. Like, oh, comfortable. You just saw the homies and you just saw the friends and we're just chilling. Now it's just like, maybe make it 15. I don't fucking know, but like 15 will be nice. 10 will be the greatest, technically. Like, but streamlining is streamlining, and better have WoW with updates than WoW being dead. So I'll take it.
Which is definitely true when it comes to World of Warcraft raiding as well. Although encounter difficulty was even more ridiculous once you got hyper-competitive players min-maxing every single little thing of a 10-man encounter, which were usually balanced after they did the 25-man modes, since they would usually just scale down encounters rather than design something for 10-man, except for 1 or 2 fights per raid where they would design those around 10-man exclusively and then scale them up, and they were actually balanced appropriately for World First Raiders. So a lot of people who took 10-man Mythic seriously would have really sacky comps, like only running and stacking whatever the best class or utility was during that expansion, like maybe just bringing 5 hunters or 5 mages, and bringing the least amount of healers possible so they can have more DPS. In fact, there were some competitive...
It is actually like since I saw a problem like this, it is actually legitimate to fucking take it away. But again, the problem is that like it concerns like 5 fucking people. So I think like the mistake that they actually did about this is just that like they concerned themselves a little bit too much about like the competitive scene of like World First. Actually, I'm lying because like these days, well, back in the day, World First, no one cared. These days, actually, fucking like World First, WoW is actually popular again. Popular. Well, it was never this popular before. It was like at least from like a YouTube and streaming, like basically a content creation standpoint. So and also like an entertainment standpoint. Like you even see like arenas being like tournaments being like actually like watched. So this is actually like it makes sense. It makes sense, but because it became popular back in the day, was it? Nah, dude. Like it wasn't that popular. The fucking world first. It was like the fucking like video was like found like of paragons and stuff. So, was found on a fucking dead website of like a guild that will never recruit you and that fucking like got the title and no one really cared and the world first like list was on another dead website that like five like another like 10 people that were like really just curious about it fucking watched it.
Of 10-man teams that tried to bring no healers, and some of those teams actually had some success. That's just the level of craziness people were trying in the 10-man modes, where Blizzard really wants people to bring a mix of everything to a fight. That's why they give a whole bunch of buffs to different classes in order to encourage you to bring a priest for fortitude, a demon hunter for debuffs, a warrior for their shouts, a warlock for their further utility, and etc, etc. And since Blizzard was just designing their fights for the 25-man modes anyway, and then just scaling them
Just like it was in vanilla, like back in vanilla and back in like TBC and half of the Lich King, this philosophy was adopted and it was like fucking like legitimate and it was functioning. I don't know why is it, I feel that like these days actually it's too streamlined where like there is not enough buffs per class or utility per specialization and classes. Where like just like make one or two buffs per spec and class and then it makes like it doesn't matter if it's like really important or not, it just makes the game more interesting, spicier, you know what I mean?
down afterwards, it obviously made sense for them to pick 20 man as their new default hardest difficulty, rather than the mode that they bounce around as an afterthought. Because it was just more fun for them to throw everything at the wall because they knew a 20-man roster could realistically bring something that was needed for a particular fight. Like if they absolutely needed a warlock to have gateway in order to avoid the spikes in Painsmith, for example. So because Blizzard was designing them for the 25 mans anyway, and they didn't like how many shenanigans the world first 10-player mythic groups were getting into, it was kind of a no-brainer for them just to remove that mode and go into 25 man, like they all wanted to design for anyway. And that's pretty much why 10-man raiding died. No one at the competitive level took it seriously, and it was just the fun mode full of jank. However, that doesn't really disregard the fact that 10-man raiding was very popular, since it was mostly popular because it was just easier to do than the 25-man. But that doesn't mean
It was not easier, it was more accessible on a guild level, community level, and this is why a lot of people like actually remember the first expansions like well TBC and Wrath of the Lich King and Mob and Kata rather than the other ones because they were able to fucking like have friends and a roster that like they actually fucking knew.
you should throw it out either. If Blizzard were to convert the 20-man mythics today into 10-mans, they would be horribly unbalanced because the game is just not designed around that. But they could attempt to fix a lot of those problems by just removing class-specific buffs. A priest doesn't need to give fortitude, they can just give everyone 5% more health baseline. You don't need a monk or demon hunter to give debuffs to a boss, just lower the boss's health by 10%.
Or add more and just like add more like buffs and just like buffs or debuffs that are unique to classes, but based on specializations. Like just fucking like flood with flood buffs with specializations, and with that you get like a like homogeneous chaos, you know. And but like it some in game design this actually fix things because like it allows it removes abuse, and also like one of the ways that like in game design you fix things is actually by making by making the option of the interesting non min-maxing triad option like actually more like by making it interesting, and not by because it's interesting to have like special buff, and by making it powerful. So basically, you search for variety. Well, make it interesting to fucking like look for it. You know, you search for variety when it comes to like your raid like your raid roster. So you try to make it so that there's no like 15 times the same class. Well, make it the player will always choose the fucking easier answer and the fucking gearing answer, like the fucking successful answer. So you have to make it not like better, but not only better, but better and more interesting. And I think that like more buffs and like more like specialization buff and debuff identity, like so basically utility identity can fucking help with that. Because like these days, like there's like 3 buffs that I see and that's it.
The Warlock's portals are definitely a lot harder to just fix easily, but so was Bloodlust for the longest time. The way they fixed that was just by giving it to other classes and having it on a consumable. If they just made an item that you can place down and it would simulate the portal, well, there you go. Create items which can just simulate the buffs if you really want them to stay in the game, like they used to have anyway before they removed them for some reason. If they really wanted mechanics to require certain classes with immunities, just give more immunities to more characters. I remember in Legion they took away the 90% damage reduction of dispersion from Shadow Priests because they didn't feel like they should have a quasi-immunity while also being able to do lots of damage. If a fight is so easy that you can heal it with one player, maybe they could design the fights around 10 people instead of scaling it down from 20 from the get-go. What I'm trying to say is there are fixes to all the problems that they had, they just don't want to fix them. For the combined reason that they prefer the bigger raid sizes to design around anyway, and also the community of World First Raiders didn't take it seriously. Which really reminds me of Heroes of the Storm, Blizzard's MOBA game which ultimately failed and is now maintenance mode. When it
Yeah, this is true. But like they actually did a bet on they really truly did a bet on mythic rating and the popularity of like world first competition, because like back in the day, like even 5 years ago, that no one fucking heard about like race of world first. And as we speak, like the undermine world first actual raid first like a race actually ended, and it was actually fucking popular, and it was like one of the most popular things on Twitch. So they actually took a bet as well, did a bet as well, that like it will be actually like entertaining and something that like so taking in account how seriously the 5 guilds that actually get to fucking compete will get into it. Well, actually it was a successful bet. But so technically, like my argument about like for that like is caring about the high hand type of player that like doesn't exist for like the average consumer is that will never be the average consumer, is actually a bet that they actually won, because world first race is actually like popular. So good job on you, Blizzard, because like this is actually a bet in game design that they could have lost. They could have lost, and world race first could have been like just like something forgotten, just like other games tried, and just like they also like tried, let's say, with like rated battlegrounds, or like other ideas that like didn't fucking like work out.
first launched, it was trying to compete with 2 pre-established, very popular MOBAs, and Heroes of the Storm was able to stand out a bit by having incredibly unique characters that just could not exist in the other 2 games, like Murky, Cho'Gall, or Abathur. Cho'Gall literally requires 2 players working together in order to control a single character, and Abathur is only slightly stronger than a minion, and basically contributes to the fight by sitting in base all game and just providing buffs, while his slugs slowly push every 15 seconds. And these 3 characters were incredibly popular in the game and very well loved. So what Blizzard did was just never try anything like this ever again, because they wanted it to become an esport, and these kinds of characters cause problems in competitive environments. After Cho'Gall, I believe, Blizzard only ever released heroes that could compete in the meta without any jank, before putting the game in maintenance mode. They could have easily just made Heroes of the Storm the fun MOBA to play, but I don't think they want that. I think one of the core philosophies of some of the developers there is for their games to have a competitive scene. I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with that, as Nintendo does the complete opposite with Super Smash Bros. They hate that people take that game seriously and try to make it as casual as possible. It's just on the pendulum scale of where
And you can see that like it actually works. Like Smash Bros. Melee and Smash Bros. Is actually like highly competitive because it's designed casually. And it's really interesting to see. Yeah, some things are broken, but like it's really like it's not the biggest scene, but yeah, you need to find in between. But like to the credit of Blizzards, they never fucking did a MOBA before, and still it's a good looking MOBA that like not a lot of people played, especially right now. But still, it's a fucking like valuable game and game that actually like is legitimate enough. So doing this mistake, well, basically they lost like as much as they won the bet for like world first races, they won the bet about like being a popular for it to be a popular esport to watch and to actually like participate in, as they lost the bet with Heroes of the Storm. Is it bad? I mean, it's still in maintenance mode, and the thing is that like they could just reforge it, so maybe there's a hope. Like I love Blizzard, so I won't like yeah.
Blizzard leans, I think they would rather if all their games had a competitive scene, and definitely make that a priority as well. And since 10-man raiding is kind of on the scale of casual, it makes sense why they would drop it based on their philosophies. Even if I think they really should not have and should bring it back. In the same way, I wish they would make more creative characters like Cho'Gall or Abathur in Heroes of the Storm. And here's the funny thing about WoW when it comes to catering to the casual player base. They actually stood out in vanilla WoW because they were the only MMO to cater to the casual player. In fact, MMO players at the time thought of WoW as the baby game because it didn't even de-level your player if you died too many times. And current WoW is still incredibly casually friendly. In fact, all of the other difficulties of raids are very friendly towards casual guilds.
Yeah, and what's interesting is that like there is like a leeway to a more complicated game. Basically, you get like the best of both worlds, right? Which is actually like something really great. While at the same time, like yeah, I don't know, like yeah. Anyway,
they just want there to be a hard mode to exist only for the most hardcore players. Which is a nice carrot on the stick for people playing the game, as they know they can always just join a Mythic Guild if they want to do the hardest content, but they don't have to. And if the current system works, and has been the one they've been using for the past 4 expansions, doesn't that mean there's no reason to try to make a 10-man mode Mythic now? Personally, I don't think so. For them to implement 10-man Mythics, that would require more work on their part to try to make the mode not a cakewalk for competitive players. But currently, Mythics are already a cakewalk for competitive players, after the first month, as Blizzard regularly nerfs encounters after world firsts are achieved anyway. Take the current Mythic Sylvanas for example. He was incredibly difficult in a finely tuned fight within the first week or two. However, the version that guilds are working on today is just straight up an easier encounter than what existed during that first week.
yeah, but this is like also like something that I remember when I talked to you about the average player and like left you with like basically like the teenager that like everyone tend to forget when it comes to gaming, that is actually the person that is playing the game, enjoying the game, and actually really loving the game, and not you, the middle-aged gamer that actually fucking like have complaints and fucking like understand what metagaming is and whatever the fuck. Well, basically like nerfing after that makes it so like we are not playing vanilla anymore for 20 years. Well, like a guild can fucking just like bash its fucking roster against a fucking like a Blackwing lair for like 6 months and not fucking get any results. And this is really the difference. Like basically like this doesn't exist, and this is a good thing, because like you want to allow your players to fucking see the high end and actually fucking finish the high end, similarly that other games like solo driven story driven games, like let's say Shadow of Colossus, Halo, Gears of War, God of War, right? Like games like this, that like the way that like they allow it, because like it's so frustrating to fucking like not get access to it. And like, do you know how many guilds fucking finished Naxxramas back in the day? Not a lot. Is this a good thing? No. Will it have been better if more guilds back in Nextramas in vanilla will have finished Nextramas? Because it will have been nerfed the way that like Iramarad is describing. Yeah, yeah, definitely, definitely. Like, there's no like question about it. Definitely. Like, but it makes for like the stuff of Legends where like you see like truly difficult content and accessible that used to exist. So like there are like some good to it, but it's just like yeah, like think about like Nextramas, right? If it had these updates back in the day, would it have been better for like the gaming community like invested in the game? Yes. These days, well, then what does it mean? That these days it's a good thing, like, and that like people shouldn't fucking like that you should be happy about this and not criticize like the fact that that fucking like people get to fucking finish the fucking like content, you know, and be done with it and wait for the next content to roll in.
For just a multitude of reasons, including just the availability of gear and buffs to certain classes and specs and equipment that were put out over time. Current mythics are only hard for the first few weeks, then it's kind of a joke to the competitive community. So, if the current version is already a cakewalk to competitive players after only a few weeks, and many non-first world raids have a lot of fun progressing on those fights anyway, even though they're vastly easier than they were in the first 2 weeks, what exactly is wrong with 10-man versions being the exact same? They'll basically be easier than the 20-mans from the get-go, sure, but I'm failing to see how that's exactly a problem. It would require them to balance the game around them again, but just because that's difficult doesn't mean it shouldn't be tried. If Blizzard wants to create fights with knowing they can realistically have one of every spec in there, then they just need to go the bloodless route and just give more options to more classes. I think
True.
Blizzard cares about class homogenization more than the players actually do. As how many shamans are really upset that the mage can use bloodlust instead of them?
This
And
is
as
true.
a priest main, I don't even like giving powered fortitude to people. I would be 100% fine if they just removed it from the game, or just turned it into ability which wasn't a buff you used once before a fight. So, in conclusion, 10-man mythic raiding is currently not possible at all with the way the game is designed, and would take some real work on the developer's part in order to make it ready. But seeing as Blizzard and the competitive community prefer the bigger raid sizes, this is probably not going to happen. Even
Yeah, and like also like one thing that we didn't mention is actually the storytelling and what it allows when it comes to like just the immersion and the experience, the gaming experience that 20 that's bigger raid scale allows, because 10-man raiding, fighting an army doesn't make sense, right? 25-man raiding, fighting an army makes sense, you know? And this kind of like logic of like, well, it makes sense, and because of that, well, it just like stimulate the right fucking like the right thing. It just like makes the game realistic enough for you to enjoy it more. And this is something that like you didn't mention, but that is also important, because like random like a 10-man army fighting Sylvanas or like the jailer, like realistically you do not get to fucking like create like such a grandiose fights if but you get to do it if it's an army of 20 heroes. You get me? So yeah.
even though 10-man mythics were the more popular version back when they existed for 2 expansions.
Thank you, Iramar, and like this was actually the answer that I was looking for. So the death of 10-man rating actually quite legitimate. I understand it, and I understand it from like the Blizzard standpoint, and really interesting that like they really bet. So the conclude like they really bet on the fact that like world first races. So this was like 3 years ago, right? This video. So Blizzard really bet back in the day that like world first rating will become popular, just like they did with Heroes of the Storm, like competitive scene, and it actually succeeded. it actually succeeded because like Undermine got released like less than 3 months ago, and the world first was actually fucking popping off on Twitch, on YouTube, on everywhere. So and like this was like great moments. So yeah, this was like a really really good video. This was really actually answered my question. So thank you, Ramard. This guy does like really good videos about WoW. You should check him out. Anyway.